Upon release, Yae Miko was one of the worst received 5 stars ever. People said had no niche, 3-star official, complete waste of a wish, and there was so much drama surrounding her that Hoyoverse actually made a fix for her kit and then reversed it after they got even more backlash for it. Personally, I thought she was always pretty good, at least in a few teams, but everyone changed their mind when Dendro came around, and now she's a well-established top or high-tier character. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Yae Miko is an off-field damage dealer, but she has a relatively high field time requirement compared to other off-field damage dealers like Fischl. She also works really great as an on-field driver for Dendro teams, or as a mix of an off-field, on-field character with a partner like Tighnari. The way her damage works is incredibly synergistic with Dendro, and her whole kit is actually synergistic with Dendro. She deals damage through a number of small hits from her skill, which rotate between different enemies at random, doing small instances electro damage to all of them. These kind of attacks are actually what Dendro benefits the most with Quicken, because Dendro adds a flat damage bonus to every single electro hit. So one big slash, such as Raiden Slash, is not as benefited from Quicken as many tiny hits, such as Yae Miko's or Fischl's. Even her ultimate has multiple electro hits, which can benefit from Quicken, rather than if it was one gigantic burst with just one big nuke, it hits 4 times, giving you multiple instances of buff damage from Quicken. In addition, she has a passive that translates Elemental Mastery into attack, allowing you to get away with building more Elemental Mastery on her, which allows you to choose Elemental Mastery or attack for your sands, for your substats, for your weapons, and allows her to benefit from Quicken even more. So you can tell, even from when she was first released, they built her fully with Dendro in mind. She's had quite a few changes since she released. Dendro in general was the biggest one, and then Nahida was a big buff to her team's damage, although still she lacked a Dendro defensive option, but Yae came and was that for her, and that made her Quicken teams even better, because now, for at least those of us who want to run with a more comfortable character, allowing you to run your animal as not a healer or as sacrifice it for a Zhongli or something, and you can still run Kazuha or Sucrose as your animal. I personally strongly prefer Kazuha, but you can use the Dendro slot Yae for your healer. Baizhu came out, and she's even more comfortable in her Quicken teams with Baizhu because of the interruption resistance he provides, and it's very possible that Kirara will be her best partner yet, because she'll provide an even stronger shield and even more resistance to interruption. But we'll have to wait for Kirara's official release. I'll definitely be testing it on day 1, so make sure to stick around and subscribe for that. For Yae Miko's best teams, this is her premier team that will do the most damage. So if you want your Yae Miko to clear as fast as possible, hit the biggest numbers possible, and be the center of attention and the star of the show, this is her highest damaging team for AoE, and this is her highest damaging team for single target. Both teams feel absolutely incredible to play, and if you have these characters, I highly recommend either of these. However, you'll notice that neither of these has any sort of healing or defensive option, and Yae Miko is a character that's hard to use without a defensive option. I have personally cleared the Abyss with these teams. However, it is challenging, it is hard to do, especially in the era of consecrated beasts, doing 50 to 75% of your health in one hit, doing reactions on you. It's very uncomfortable and very difficult to do. So if you're using Kazuha on these teams, I recommend swapping Nahida out for Baizhu or for Yae. If you don't have Kazuha, you can use Sucrose instead. I did clear the Abyss with this team, but I really do have to say I did not like it as much as the Kazuha variant, because Kazuha, although he doesn't give your team EM, he does give your team damage bonus, which is a stat that just scales better. Plus, he does more personal damage, he has more easily abusable crowd control, he gives you more iframes for your team, and he's generally just easier to play and more consistent for Abyss clears, and has faster times. In my experience, I know some people just love singing Sucrose's praises, and I do think Sucrose is great, but I think Kazuha, for me, is irreplaceable in this team. That's just my opinion. I do think Baizhu is an upgrade on this team for comfort, and I do think Kirara could be really good here as well, potentially even better than Baizhu. If you're wanting to do the Tighnari variant, this is the team I'd recommend. You can also put Yae in the Baizhu slot. I really like the double Dendro, double Electro, and of course Kirara will work in Baiju's slot as well. You can also do something like a Quick Bloom team, which is similar to Cyno's Quick Bloom teams. However, unlike Cyno, I prefer Yae Miko as a driver for a Quicken team versus a Quick Bloom team. They feel really, really strong. They feel much better than Hyper Bloom teams in AoE, and not quite as good, but still serviceable in single target. So I don't necessarily really recommend her for Quick Bloom, but it is still very, very strong. And if you want to use her, it's very good. You can also run Kokomi instead of the Xingqiu slot, and then run Kazuha here. So something like this. I'll be getting Kokomi on her next rerun, so this will definitely work. Or you can put Fischl right here. This will be good too. Barbara doesn't work because she doesn't have enough Hydro application. Candace could also work okay, but again, I would just stick to a Quicken team at that point. You can also use a Taser team, but I would prefer Beto for Taser teams. I don't really like Taser teams all that much anyways, especially with Dendro in the picture. You just might as well add Dendro and make it a Hyper Bloom team. And you also finally can run her as a Super Conduct support for Eula, but that is super gross. Don't do that. My personal favorite team, because I am a huge Raiden simp, is Raiden Yae, and I love this team. I cannot tell you how amazing this team is. I personally prefer it to any other Raiden version and any other Yae Miko team. The rotations sync up perfectly. It's super smooth and flexible to play. It works great against bosses. It works even better in multi-wave content. You have a lot of control, especially as you get good with the team, as to when and how you use their bursts to maintain energy, to maintain the flow. It's a very dynamic team. You have a lot of control, and it feels really, really fun and amazing to play. Its damage output is pretty much identical to a C6 Kujo Sara in place of Yae Miko. So if you're like me and you don't want to do Kujo Sara, or you don't have her C6 and you want to make the best Raiden team possible, this is it. I really, really love this team. You can also switch Bennett out for Baiju, and it can be a Dendro team. This is really, really good too. And then you can use National on the other side or something like that. And of course, lore-wise, using Yae Miko and Raiden Shogun together is just perfect. You can also do Mono Electro if you just want to use all the Unizuman characters all together. This is a pretty and this can work. It doesn't have a healer though. You may have to put Jean or Baiju into this last slot, but this is an option as well. Now let's talk about how she compares to other similar characters. I'd say that these three are the characters that people often compare her to the most. I would say she doesn't really compete with Fischl all that much. The only team that you'd really replace Yae for Fischl in is maybe that Raiden team I talked about. If you don't have Kujo Sara at C6, you can run Fischl in that slot, and I prefer Yae every day of the week for that one. But generally you'll use Yae Miko alongside Fischl, because Yae Miko again is just such a great driver of Fischl's passive, so highly recommend Fischl. And the other people that directly compete with Yae Miko is the on-field Electro. So Keqing and Cyno, in their Quicken teams, they also drive Fischl really well. Yae Miko does it the best. However, if you're pulling just for meta reasons to have a Quicken team and you already have a Keqing is really, really close in terms of her performance. It's much more worth it. For example, I would rather run Keqing with Kazuha than I would Yae Miko without Kazuha. So I would say the value isn't super high, but Yae Miko is definitely stronger. And for Quicken, Yae Miko again definitely stronger than Cyno, but Cyno does outpace her for Hyper Bloom. So make of that what you will. All the characters are good. They all have their little different niches. And again, the most important thing is you pick the character you love, because it's way more fun to play with characters you love. Let's talk about her gearing and how valuable and efficient she is. And this is actually her best free-to-play weapon, the Oathsworn Eye. The Widsith is also really, really good. Hakushin Ring is pretty good as well. Sacrificial Fragments. The Elemental Mastery is fine in Quicken teams, but the passive is sort of useless. In general, the best weapons are weapons where you make use of both the main stat and the passive. Simple, because then you make use of the most stats. Favonius, she's not quite energy hungry enough for this to be her best weapon. She's mostly a damage dealer, so you want to maximize that. Solar Pearl, if you're using her in a Quicken team and doing normal attacks to drive Fischl, the Solar Pearl can actually be pretty darn good. You can definitely use it. I think I would choose it over the Widsith, and I might even choose it on the Oathsworn Eye, depending on if you have more crit substats in your artifacts or if you have more ER substats in your artifacts. If you don't have ER substats, go with the Oathsworn Eye. She is pretty energy hungry before her constellations, and I don't really recommend using any of the other weapons. So that's really what I would recommend for her. If you want to go for her weapon, you can. She does make good use of it, but she's easily strong enough to clear the game. So only get it if you're a huge Yae Miko simp and you just want to have the best aesthetics or whatever for your girl. For artifacts, it's really, really nice because you can mix and match two-piece sets. I'm using a two-piece EM set and a two-piece attack set. She doesn't really have a best in slot artifact set, maybe the Emblem of Severed Fates, but not really. So I highly recommend getting away with the best two-piece set you have. I have some pretty good substats on this set: crit rate, crit damage, elemental mastery, elemental mastery, attack, pretty much no wasted substats. Oh, and then I have a really bad goblet. Normally I'm running this one. Yeah, so with something like this, right, you can get pretty insane substats from a two-piece, and then a pretty darn good circlet. So you can mix and match, and because there's so many EM two-pieces and attack percent two-pieces in this game, there's a really high chance that you have an amazing two-piece, and therefore gearing your Yae Miko will be really efficient and really powerful. Constellations, her C1, again, only go for constellations, similar to the weapon. If you're a huge Yae Miko simp and you just really want to max out your favorite character, I definitely understand the appeal. Her C1 is a great stopping point for fixing her ER needs. Definitely don't use the Oathsworn Eye if you use C1. C2 increases her attack range. I wouldn't really go for that. I just stick to C1. Unless, again, you're a massive simp, and fine. For talents, I've only just started leveling up her normal because her skill and burst were the only thing I used on Raiden teams. But for Quicken now, I'm using her normals as well, so you'll want to level up all three as much as you can. If you're using Quicken teams, her talent multipliers don't matter quite as much as they do if you're using her on a Raiden team, for example. So overall, how does she feel to play? How strong does she feel? Where would I put her on a tier list? Would I recommend going for this character? I think she feels very strong. She feels quite impactful. If you really like this character, she will not disappoint you. She's flexible enough to be in multiple teams. She works with enough characters. There's free-to-play teams. There's late-game teams when you have a bigger selection of 5 stars. She feels very strong. She definitely doesn't enter the realm of account unlock or must pull characters. So if you don't have a desire to go for Yae Miko, I definitely wouldn't. But if you do, you will definitely not be disappointed with how she performs. I will say that her playstyle is definitely something that takes some getting used to. She doesn't have any iframes when she's using her skill, and the animations are pretty long. I have been able to practice and play her a lot and be able to dodge around enemy patterns with her skill, and honestly it feels pretty satisfying and feels pretty fun. I think it's a fun form of skill expression, but I know some people really hate it, so definitely test her out in her trial beforehand. For future prospects, to be honest, I don't see her really moving up or down on the tier list. I think she has great single target, great AoE. She has different kinds of teams. She's flexible enough to work with lots of teams, so I think she's going to be relatively future proof, but and probably not really climb super high, much higher than she really is right now. I think she has everything she needs to make the most of her kit, and I think she's in a really great spot. For overworld and aesthetic, she's one of my favorite characters in the overworld because her turrets can hit up high on those annoying hilly trails on those towers, and they can hit specters really nice. Of course, the mushrooms in Sumeru, they turn into the evil mushrooms when they get hit by Pyro Electro, so you can't really use her against those mushrooms, which is super annoying. What a terrible mechanic, by the way, since none of the characters use the activated cores. Unbelievable. Anyways, aesthetically, she looks amazing. Definitely a really great design. I super love it. The other character that's running with Yae Miko is Yoimiya. My guide is right over there. The banner review is on my channel as well, and stay tuned for the day 1 Kirara video. We're going to be testing how good she is at C0 and at C4. So enjoy. Talk to you soon.